Greetings, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Chris Boltendahl of the band Gravedigger. Gravedigger, of course, folks, as you know, is one of my favorite bands of all time, easily in my top 25. There is a previous video where I review their newest album, and I have a great interview with Chris. Chris is a really cool dude. He came on my show back in 1998 when Knights of the Cross came out, and he was one of the first people. He was part of that first group of musicians I had on my radio show back in the day, the first year that it aired. So with that said, check it out. New Gravedigger interview with myself and Chris Boltendahl, and man, really cool stuff. A lot of great stuff. We talk a lot about the band, a lot about the new album, a lot about the future, and here you go. Chris, I have to say that as a longtime fan of this band, I love this record. I would say Symbol of Eternity is probably in my top 5, as far as Gravedigger albums. But the one thing also that impressed me was the way that you guys promoted this, marketed this. You had a lot of really great merchandise and put a lot of effort into that. And I just want to start off by telling you that I thought that was great. And it was really great. And the fact that you sold out of a bit of it, I think, was awesome as well. So great job in this album. I'm going to tell you it's a top 5 album for me for this year. And I just want to tell you, hey, I love the record.
I love the record too. And it's my first, more or less, Gravedigger record I produced and mixed mastered by myself. So, yeah, it couldn't get better.
Awesome. So, speaking of mixing and mastering, you've been doing a lot of that. And maybe tell everybody about you, going to the studio, being like a producer and mixing records. And, that seems to be something that you've been doing recently. And you've done a couple records that I think sounded pretty good. And maybe talk a bit about that.
Yeah, as you know, we had the pandemic and we had no shows during this time. And then I was thinking, what can I do? Sitting here in my house and doing nothing. So I decided to start another chapter in my life in music. And I said to myself, okay, I watched on monitors and mixing consoles and everything 40 years now. And I want to learn it. And then I start, exercising everything. And I did my first 2 small productions here in my studio. And it was Warwolf and Veritatis, 2 bands from Germany. Yeah, and then I started right now with the Gravedigger album. And it was a long but a very exciting process. And the result you have in your ears, in your CD player and streaming platforms everywhere. And since that, I'm working on different records here in my studio, and I finished already my solo album, so everything's fine.
Oh, give us a little details. You have a solo album. I'm interested to hear what that might sound like. Does it sound like Gravedigger? Does it got like a mix of stuff? Maybe give us a little bit of details on that. And
details a little bit early because we will announce everything on the 1st of January.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that it's power metal. It's more power metal than Gravedigger. And because I'm working with a different guitar player there and different bass player and another drummer. And I would say it sounds like Gravedigger meets Metal Church. So it's the way it is.
Okay. That's a good description. So putting this record out, I mean, obviously we talked about the pandemic and a lot of bands have faced a lot of obstacles. And I know you've done you've been experienced as far as managing, the band and stuff like that. And was it difficult? Was touring difficult for you? Because I know the cost of everything has gone up, and getting all the merchandise too has been a challenge for a lot of people. And was this a problem for you, or did you find a way around a lot of this stuff?
I think in the first year of the pandemic, it was in 2020. Everything was totally difficult because we had some really hard rules here in Germany, not like in China, but we have the contact, forbidden to contact each other, and it was a holy shit. But this year we played, I think, 2 or 3 shows in the summertime. It was a small time frame where you can do that, and yeah, it was hard to get merchandise and everything because most of the people were in short work. We call it here, like in Germany, and everything was totally changed at this time.
Yeah.
And in 2021, it was also difficult because it was up and down, and then there was a time frame. Everything was open, then it was closed, and everything was totally bullshit. Everything was moved to this year. So, and in this year we have a lot of, from the summertime since May, we had a lot of shows because a lot of shows were moved from the last 2 years. We played a lot of festivals, also the biggest festivals. And in 2020, we also released the Fields of Blood album, but we couldn't play so many shows. So we did all the stuff this year. And it was really a hard summertime because a lot of things start working again. But with all the people coming to the festivals, all the infrastructure wasn't fit so well. Yeah. So, yeah, it was hard, but we make the best of it, and we're looking now for 2023.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you, too. Fields of Blood, to me, is also like a top 5 Gravedigger album for me. These last 2 records have just, in my opinion, just from the songwriting perspective, have been great. And was there anything that changed within you guys, or just you guys just wrote it and that's how it was? Because I can tell you, I've loved this band for about 25 years now, and these last 2 records really blew me away when I first heard them. Fields of Blood, especially coming out during a time when we had the pandemic going on, and it wasn't the greatest time to release something, but I think the sound of the albums and the production and the mix and everything you did on this recent one, I think was great. And, there seemed to be a different vibe in the band, at least from my perspective as a listener.
It's like an old wine, So much older we get, so much better. No, I think that The Living Dead was the last album with Stefan Arnold on drums.
Mm-hmm.
And now, since Fields of Blood, we have Markus Kniep on drums, and he has a different style playing,
Mm-hmm.
He can do so many different things like Stefan. Stefan was a brilliant drummer too, but he was also old-fashioned like we, and now we get some fresh blood in the band with Markus on drums.
Yeah.
And that changed a bit the focus, And I think that Axel and I, we are more focused on the basic elements of Gravedigger now. We are not trying like on Living Dead. We did some different stuff. With the Zombie Dance, which is also a very successful song, but we make some experiments. And now, since the last 2 records, we are more focused on what Gravedigger is. And now also when I'm did the master and the mixing and everything here in my studio, also the vocals, I was totally focused on what Gravedigger is. So I think that we have a couple of more records to come out in the next years, which will blow you away, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we have refreshed our batteries, and yes, we have fun to make this music. I think that is the most important thing, that we like what we do, and as older we get, we like it more and more and more. So
right,
yeah, it's good.
Now, you've been around, obviously, for, you talked about for 40 years, recording. And when you started doing, mixing and albums and stuff like that, was there anything that you came across that you thought you knew, but then you like, oh, maybe it's got to be done this way? Was there any misconception about what you thought you'd be doing? So in other words, hey, I've seen this, I've seen that, but then you go and do it yourself. Was there anything that you learned that was different than what you thought it would be, as far as, making records and mixing them and producing them?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, we since The Living Dead, we also with Fields of Blood, we worked in studios,
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, the last 25 years, we worked in the principal studios with owner and producer Jörg Umbreit. That was a really successful work, and we love to work with him. And besides that, we are really good friends. Jörg and I, and my son and his son, we're making together music now. And so he supported me also and said, "Hey, Chris, try it by yourself, and you get my support." And he said what he's using in the studio, and I tried it in my studio. And so it was also a good relationship and a good cooperation. So, but if you're sitting in front of a mixing console and somebody is doing that for you, that is different, because you have to tell him, and you have to tell him, and you have to tell him. If you do it by yourself, you can bring your feelings and everything, into. You have much more time. I can do it when I go into the studio. I have a time frame of 3 weeks, or less, or more, depends on the money. But when I'm working in my studio, I have all the time of the world, and I can do it in 3 months, and do experiments, and working with different sounds and everything. So it was much easier.
And it's interesting you say that, because I've known people who have, that start producing their own stuff, and they start to really overthink what they are doing. They think, like, is this going to sound great? Is this going to be good? Whether before they had a producer or somebody in there telling them, hey, this is what it's going to be. This is what it sound like. It's going to sound like it's going to sound good. And it feels like you didn't do that. It feels like you already knew, what you wanted and went for it, and really didn't overthink it. Because I'll be honest with you, the last album I thought sounded great. And it didn't, the way you're talking about it, it just feels like you were pretty confident in what you were doing and pretty focused on that, and didn't have to overthink things like some people and musicians sometimes will do when they start producing their own albums.
Yeah, I think on the other side, you can take all the time you want. If you're working in your own studio, okay, we can take 3 months, 6 months, until it is like we want to do it, And if you work in a studio, you have to book the studio. You're focused on this 2-3 weeks in the studio. And in my home studio, I can work as long as I want. And if I stand up in the night, I start working,
Yeah.
So I'm totally independent. And now I think I'm more experienced now, that you will listen when the solo album will release next year. And I promise that the next Gravedigger album will sound much better, because I'm working a lot, and I know more now, the workflow and everything. So it's easier, and I'm totally happy.
I could totally see that. The one thing, Symbol of Eternity, was it a concept album this time, or was it more or less just a collection of stuff? I mean, because I've always known Gravedigger, even if you haven't done that, there's always been concept records mostly. And the Symbol of Eternity, a concept, is it like a story or anything like that?
Yeah, it's definitely a concept album about the Templars. Again, it's a loose sequel for the Knights of the Cross album, and in this time we deal with the legend, the myths, and everything, the rumors behind the Templars, And Knights of the Cross was totally historical. Tuck, 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 tuck.
Yeah.
But Symbol of Eternity is, it's like a big story around the Templars, And I could put also my opinion about that in the lyrics and everything. So it's a good. It's also a little historical concept, but only the basics. The rest is more, I'm telling story about the Templars, the legends, the myths, the secrets behind the order and everything.
Well, I remember, it's funny, I remember when you guys played here in Cleveland, you guys played the US, and I was seeing people showing up. I mean, you were opening for Blind Guardian, but I was seeing people showing up in kilts and all sorts of stuff. And there were a lot of Gravedigger fans there. I was, I never knew what kind of fan base you had over here, but at least here, there were people that traveled to the show and had a lot of that. And when you toured the US last, were you surprised by some of that? Did you know you had a pretty decent amount of fan base, or was every city sort of different for you?
It was totally different in cities. So at the East Coast, it's New York and Philadelphia and everywhere there. It was a huge success. And then in the middle, like Denver and all the stuff, it was a little bit less. But then on the West Coast again, San Francisco and Los Angeles, there was also a huge success, like in the South too, like Florida and Dallas, Houston. So I think that we got a lot of new fans also there, and that we could satisfy the older fans which appeared on the shows. But for us as a single band, it's not easy to tour the US,
Yeah.
by ourselves alone. And we have to do it with another band. And we were in discussions during the pandemic to do a tour together with Sanctuary, but it didn't happen at the end. And now we will see. Now we are focused more or less here on the European market,
yeah,
and South America. But let's see what the future will bring.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to ask. I have to ask this. You have been, in my opinion, the band has been very, very consistent. For over 30 years, you've always, even if you've had a different lineup, you've always put out a pretty strong or a solid album. And what do you feel has kept that consistency? Because you've had three different guitar players and some different bass players and drummers. And what do you feel has kept the band consistently putting out solid and good albums?
I think Gravedigger is in my heart because I always wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a musician. And then when I started Gravedigger in 1980, I was totally behind that, And I go through so many up and downs, like a big wave, Then when Uwe Lulif left the band and he tried to steal the name from me, and then money came into the band, and it was all over the years. I make so many experience, and it made me to the person what I am today. And I'm a happy guy, Now in 4 weeks I have my 61 birthday, and I feel better than before. And I'm so much looking forward for the band and everything the band have for me, And so I'm very positive.
Well, and you should be, because when I saw you guys play live, there was just some kind of, between you and Axel, for example. I remember hearing of him and his other band. I think it was Domain. I think that was the name of the band I used to listen to that he was in. And I just, seeing you on stage, there was just some kind of chemistry between you and him. And you can hear that on the albums. You really can. And you've worked with him for quite a while now. And what is it between you both that really keeps you working well together?
It's a respect for each other, I know what he's doing, where all the positive things he's doing, and he's a good guitar player, and we respect each other, and we have a good combination. When I have a chorus, I sing it on my phone and I send it to him, and he knows, oh yes, yeah, that's cool, and he put it into music, and I think that is the magic behind our cooperation,
Yeah.
And I know Axel so many times, so many years before he joined the band, And so I think we have a couple of records to go. So I also made the Hellrider project with him. So let's see. I think when the tour is over in May, June next year, I would start thinking about another concept, what we can do, and thinking about songs and music. And then I would set together with him, and then we start making new music for release, definitely in 2024.
I don't know. I almost feel that in talking to you, you might have more than a couple records left. There's just this energy. There's an energy level that I can I can feel from you that really makes it like, man, guys could just keep going, and I really, it's interesting. Some bands will, have their heyday and then they don't really release anything really great as they get older, but you guys have managed to do that. And to me, I think you got more than a couple albums. That's just my opinion. I think there's a lot more left in you, and talking about producing, have you, besides Gravedigger in your solo album, have you looked to maybe produce any other bands, or if a band is looking to get an album mixed or work with you, is there any way they can get in touch with you to do that?
The last one I did was the White Skull album.
Mm-hmm.
And since this summer, this year, I'm working on the solo album. We finished it a couple of days ago, and I'm doing an album now again with the German band Warwolf. We are in the beginning, and we're working at the first new songs. And then I do a band here from my hometown here in Cologne. It's Rigorous. They are also a good band. Yeah, and then I start with Gravedigger. I'm not forced to have so much income with the studio now, because we are playing a lot with Gravedigger, and I have my income, so I can do what I want, and let's see what happens. I'm free for everything,
After, when you were able to actually, it felt like musicians were like the only people out of work for the longest time. And when you started playing shows, what was it like to come out and play shows again? Did you get a big turnout of people when they came out? I mean, people were obviously, craving live music and some way to get away from everybody, but get away from all the stuff going on in the world. But did you have, when you started playing out, was there a huge attendance? Were people afraid to come out? Was a place full? And how did that work out for you when you first started playing shows again?
Oh, it was so different this summer. We played in front of 100 people and we played in front of 80,000 people,
Yeah.
So it was totally different. It depends on the place. We played open airs, small open airs, like a private party. We played in the rain and in thunder and lightning. We play, I don't know, we play in Mexico in front of 20,000 people for 40 degrees. It was hot like hell, and we traveled around so many times. I drove with my car this summer 12,000 kilometers, only for festivals around here and in countries beside Germany. So I think we played 30 shows, something like that.
Yeah.
And we have another 30 shows booked for next year. And so everything is moving for the band. That's a good way, There is no stagnation, and we are moving forward and forward.
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned in the beginning, you did a really great job with the merchandising of this new album and really promoted it. You had probably, I lost count, but you had several different vinyls. You had box sets. You had all these packages people could buy, and I thought that, and to me, I think when bands do that, it's pretty important. But speaking from the perspective of somebody that likes to get physical product, it seems to me that vinyl's sort of taken off for a lot of people. And, is that something that you sold a lot of? And why do you think people have gone back to that?
I think that the CD is small, and, it's like a hamburger, The CD is nowadays like a hamburger from what it is worth, at the end. But if you have a vinyl with nice colors, all this splatter, the artwork is much better on in a bigger size, like on a vinyl sleeve. And I think that people discovered that again for themselves, that music could be also culture, and that music is not only Spotify,
Yeah.
And if you see the artwork of the new Gravedigger album on vinyl, it's wait for me, wait 1 second. Yeah. It's really awesome. You can see all the details, what the artist made of on in his work. But if you have the CD, it's like you can't see anything, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that people use the CD or streaming for their fast food enjoying music. That's the reason why it's called the CD like a hamburger. And the vinyl is like a dinner you enjoy, and you take your time to eat or to listen. And I compare that, and I think it makes more sense for the people to buy a vinyl, and they collecting it nowadays again. And that's the reason why we made so different colors. And yeah. I think it's a good way. I hope that I think we sold alone 3,000 vinyls. You know.
Yeah, I remember you ran. I think in the site you ran the first one I was going to get was actually, I think the color ran out. But I'll be honest with you, I like both, and I think the double CD thing you had with the live show on it, I thought was really cool as well. So bands talk about Spotify. Some people, some musicians absolutely hate it. Some bands embrace it, post their Spotify numbers. And where do you stand on that? Some bands are like, I kind of don't like it. It doesn't pay us a lot of money, but it gets us exposure. And I'm curious how you feel about the whole Spotify thing.
I think I see it in different ways. For me, as an artist who sell his creativity, it's shit. Yeah, because it's nothing. If you have 1 million streams, you get perhaps 3,000 euros or something like that. That is totally nothing, But for the exposure, it's good. I hope that people listen to Spotify coming to shows, not buying the record or buying the record in the show then. But at the end, when I grew up, there was no digital stuff, There was only vinyl or cassettes, And we also were happy people, and we enjoyed listening to music, and we went to shows and everywhere, But nowadays, people listen to it on Spotify. Say, listen to the first 3 songs, 60 seconds, and then they decide is the record good or no. When I was young, and perhaps the second Van Halen album, I loved the first one, and then I went into the record shop and bought the second Van Halen album and listened to it and said, oh God, this is shit. But I was a fan and bought this one. And then I moved home and gave it 2, 3, 10 times listen, And then I started loving it, And that, and if you listen to Spotify, the 30 seconds or something like that, and you are, oh, no, shit. And then you don't buy the record, But you never gave music a chance. You never give music a chance to grow, And if you buy a vinyl, then it's different. I think you gave more tries and to discover the music also.
Yeah. Well, what you just said is exactly why I don't ever review an album or do a video on anything until I've actually listened to it for quite a few times. Because sometimes you get a bad impression. Like it may not grab you right away, but when I look back at all the records that I love over the years, some of them, there's been a few of them where they didn't really grab me right away. It's just kind of that's just sort of how it was. I'll give you an example, like a Gravedigger album that I didn't like it at first, but then I got into it would be Heart of Darkness. The very beginning when I first heard it, because I had heard The Reaper and Symphony of Death, but Heart of Darkness took a little bit, but I ended up loving it after a while, after I had listened to it the 6, 7, 8 times. And sometimes that happens. You just don't, you have to kind of digest the music itself, and you have to sometimes listen to it multiple times to really get it. In some cases, it doesn't happen all the time, but when I review albums, sometimes it takes me longer because I want to make sure, is this really what my opinion is on it? Because I used to review them, and then after I review it, I ended up liking the record a lot more, so that's why I completely understand where you're coming from on that. And I grew up, I mean, again, they didn't have digital stuff early on in my day as well. I mean, you either bought a CD, a cassette, or they weren't really doing vinyl much in the '90s, but definitely was the same thing. I mean, you didn't have streaming. Streaming wasn't a thing. They didn't have high speed internet. You dialed in with a phone, so I get it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I hope that people will focus more on what music is, because music is culture. It's art, and it's not fast food. You can listen on Spotify or Deezer or somewhere else, And I think when people start to rethink what music is, then everything will growing much better again. Like now we have the development in selling vinyls,
Yeah.
So let's see, and I hope that people will rethink what music is. So I'm positive what I see now.
Yeah. Now with touring too, it seems to get a little difficult because everybody was off for a couple years in some sense, and now everybody's trying to play all at the same time, and it's become a lot of promoters. I was talking to a couple concert promoters that I know, and they say that they'll have a show where they'll have maybe 50 pre-sale tickets and suddenly 700 people show up, or 100 people could show up. They just don't know because everybody's touring at the same time, and then what happens is people only have so much money, and it just, so that almost seems like, is that been something that's been difficult for you, as far as booking shows, or is it, if you guys had not have an issue with anything like that?
I think that the situation is the same like here in Germany. When everything was starting again, everybody is booking shows, and autumn was horrible. Yeah. It was everybody moved their shows, and also a lot of shows moved to next year. Since, but we have a good time frame in January because everybody thought that, oh shit, there's winter time, we have Corona, so we go to February, March. It's more safe, and in the time when we are touring now in January here in Germany, there's only one band touring beside us. It's Hailstorm, and other bands start again in springtime, and in springtime you have the next overkill of bands coming to Germany, and you can see 10 metal shows on the same day in Berlin.
Yeah.
And that's crazy, and yeah. But we have at the beginning we thought, oh shit, how can we do the tour? What about the pre-sales? But our pre-sales are growing from week to week now. And we decided, okay, we go out and we don't move the tour again. And we do it now. And yes, we are positive, and we think that we reach a good amount of people. And it depends also. You can have 200 pre-sales, and on the in the evening you have 202,
Yeah.
But you can also have 400. But the basic we have now is that we can pay the tour, the bus, and everything. So everything what's coming now will be on top, So it's good.
Well, I'm glad you found a bus, because a lot of bands that have come here have had a hard time finding equipment and people to work too. That was another obstacle. And I don't know how it is in Europe, but in the US, there was a shortage of buses. There's a shortage of a lot of stuff. And I don't know if you've encountered that, but that seems to be a big problem here, as far as bands being able to come over here and play.
We have a road crew together, which are working very exclusive for us. They have also jobs beside Gravedigger. And so that's the reason we don't. Our crew is fixed,
Sure.
And the bus is booked so many months ago, so everything is safe, and so we don't have these problems.
That's great, man. Well, I have to say, I'm really happy you're so excited about a lot of things, because I think you have a lot of great music left in you, and I really totally believe that the best is still yet to come for you. I mean, I just, after these last couple albums, I'm like, man, these guys are like you said, a fine wine, right? I mean, that's how we That's how we put it. But I really believe that you guys really have some great stuff left in the tank, as we say here. And I'm really looking forward to what you have coming out, in the next few years, because I think it's going to be great.
You can.
Well, and the other thing too, you guys really do put on a very good show. I mean, you really do. And the one thing I also want to tell you is that the one great thing about when you go to a concert or a show, whether you're a musician playing the show or you're a fan, is that everybody's in there. You don't have to deal with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. You're in there. Everybody's happy. Everyone wants to be there. It's like an escape almost. And I think that has driven a lot. I've gone to shows where usually bands, they don't draw super well here, but I've noticed a big uptick in people. And I think part of that is they want to escape that reality. It's kind of like you go to a show, everybody's singing, everybody's cheering, and you're not thinking about all the crazy stuff going on. And I think that's starting to drive people to concerts in general.
Yeah, that is a very important thing, that you give the people a good time. That's the reason why Gravedigger is not a band who's putting out political messages or something like that. We want to entertain the people, and that the people have a good time, forget all this shit outside.
Yeah.
And I think therefore is Gravedigger, and I take them with me in the Highlands to the Templars, to King Arthur or somewhere else, and I'm telling stories, and they can sing with me and have a good time.
Yeah. I thought, I remember the Excalibur album. I remember you had a poll. I think we voted. Didn't you have like a vote, pick what concept you wanted to do? There was like 3 of them, if I remember. And that was actually really cool. And that was like the dawn days of the internet. If you remember, I mean, that was like 98 or 99, but I still remember that poll that you put out. And I actually voted. I don't think I voted for King Arthur. I think I voted for one of the other ones. I don't remember what they were now. It was so long ago, but I remember that was really cool. And have you ever thought about maybe doing that again? Because a lot of people may have forgotten about that, but I don't forget things like that. I just remember you being able to go on the Gravedigger website and vote on it. And King Arthur it's a great record. Don't get me wrong, but have you ever thought about maybe coming up with a couple concepts and maybe fans getting to vote on something like that?
Yeah, let's. I think we did so many concepts so far, and it's not so easy to find a really interesting topic. But I go back into history because we have some topics we would never sing about or do in an album about, like second or first World War.
Yeah,
I think that depends too. Our Swedish friends from Sabaton,
Yeah.
So and Wolves is more for Powerwolf or a Warwolf or all these bands. But I think we can find something really interesting. But I don't know if we do a competition or something like that. In the moment, it's too fresh. I want to finish the touring next year, and I want to finish my solo album and everything. So then I will start thinking about what we do on the next album.
Yeah. What, speaking of the Templars and, the Scottish rebellions and stuff, what really fascinated you about that stuff to go and write about it? Because the Templars are an interesting thing to read about. A lot of people, there's a lot of things that people normally, unless you read about it, a lot of people don't know a lot of the in-depth of that whole group in general. And what fascinated you about this stuff to go and decide to write about it?
It's the legend, the mites, and the secrets of everything, like William Wallace or Robert the Bruce. So there are so many legends and secrets behind these 2 persons, all about the Templars, And I'm not how can I say, a scientist, I'm a reader, and I have my visions and my fantasies if I read this stuff, and that I want to put into my lyrics and into my music, and bringing history for normal people, something like that, If people want to listen to history, they can do put on some Gravedigger records,
Yeah.
And perhaps they find something they are interested in, and then they can start reading books or watching scientist movies or something like that,
Well, Knights of the Cross is why I started reading about the Templars. So I'm just letting you know. So it inspired me for that when I was a kid. And that's how that went.
Good.
Well, I'm going to end it off here. Chris, I do appreciate your time, and I love what you've been doing. And I just think that this is still, you guys are still, I'm gonna be honest with you, even when I talk about on my radio show, or I go on video, you guys are still one of my top 25 favorite bands still. And I really enjoyed the music you've put out over the years, and playing the band in each new release. So with that said, any last words for any fans that'll check out this interview?
Yeah, my friends, we are happy that we can do our music. It's the biggest gift in our lives. And we keep going on with heavy metal till we die, perhaps. If the coffin is closed, then, but we love heavy metal, and we hope that you love heavy metal too. Enjoy Gravedigger, and enjoy Tony Webster and his radio show and everything. So thank you very much, man, and enjoy your day, enjoy metal, enjoy Christmas, and good health.